What is up? I'm Marcel and welcome back to The Modern Filmmaker. With a new year brings a new series that I'm calling The Color Academy, where I'll upload raw footage for you guys to download completely for free so you can follow me along and we can really get in depth on the more advanced color grading practices. In this video, we're going over power windows and how to really make your landscape shots pop. So as I said, I've uploaded some footage for you guys to download. The link is in the description below. You don't have to download the footage. You can definitely follow along and learn a lot about power windows in Davinci Resolve. But if you want to, and I highly suggest it, I would say download the footage. Now, I will say it is from the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 6K and it is raw. So it is about 300 megabits for 10 seconds. But if you're used to working with video, you should have an extra 300 megabytes. So go ahead and click the link down below, download the footage, and let's get started. So once you download the clip, of course you want to open Davinci Resolve and start yourself a new project. I'm going to go ahead and just click on Untitled Projects here, which will start us up a fresh new one, and we'll import our media. And mine is right here on the desktop. So I'm going to go to my desktop and find the file. It is right here, and it's quite a big file, but as I said, you guys should have enough space for the Blackmagic RAW. And you can go ahead and hit change, which will change your frame rate to the existing frame rate of the current clip, which is just 23.976, your standard kind of film-esque 24 frames a second. And from there, we can go into the project settings and look at a few things. So in here, right now you can see that I've got this set for a 1080 timeline. I'm going to go ahead and work in 4K. So I'm going to move this down to the 3840 by 2160, because even though this is a 6K clip, 6K RAW, super awesome. We don't need a 6K timeline. And if your computer cannot handle 4K, then I highly suggest just moving down to 1080 or even 720 if you have to, but 1080 should be good enough. And then from there we can come down to optimized media and render cache. And this is where you'll set the kind of codec that will be used for your optimized media. So right now I've got this set for DNHR HQX, which would be a 10-bit DNHR file, which would play back really smooth. But honestly, on my computer, Blackmagic RAW plays back super smooth. But if your computer cannot, then I suggest going down to something like DNHR HQ or even SQ, which would be 8-bit or lower. So I'll just go ahead and set mine to HQ. Even though I don't plan on using optimized media, I did want to run through that to show you guys, just in case you're working on a laptop or older computer that just does not have the compute power to work with raw footage. And then where it says optimized media resolution, you can also bump this down to half or even quarter, because this is 6K. Once again, you can see over here on the resolution to the right, 6144 by 3456. This is a huge file as in resolution. So you can actually go down to half or quarter and you'll still be working with a pretty good resolution. I'm going to keep this just where it is because, like I said, I won't be making optimized media, and I'll hit save. That way we have our 1080 time or our 4K timeline, and there I can move on. So from here, I've already kind of cut this clip down to only 10 seconds. It's a beautiful clip of the Golden Gate Bridge and these fishermen here on the shore with these waves coming in. This was shot in the morning by my buddy Tim Ramiro. And also, I'm going to be uploading a lot of these videos. And you guys let me know in the comment section down below what kind of stock footage you guys want to work on. Whether it be fashion stuff, whether it be landscape stuff, whether it be food or action footage. Let me know what kind of footage you're looking for, and I'm going to try my best to supply that now that I'm working with the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 6K. So I'm going to right click on our clip here and just go to create new timeline using selected clip. And there it'll give us a new timeline. I'll hit create, and then I'll double click on this, and this will take us right in to our clip here. Looking really good. Once again, I mean, the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 6K and the raw footage, it's almost sharper than any other camera I've seen. It almost looks more unrealistic because it's so clean. There's not a lot of noise. I've worked with Red, I've worked with the Ari, I've worked with the Ursa, and I've got to say, Red can be really noisy, which kind of hinders it from being as sharp as it could be in my personal opinion. And just how clean as far as the noise goes in the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 6K, that's such a mouthful. Gosh, help me out here, Blackmagic. But just as far as how clean it is when it comes to noise, it's so impressive to me how good this footage looks. It's just super sharp. And so from here, I'm going to go ahead and hop into the color tab, and we can really kick things off. So there's a few ways to work with raw footage. The way I like to do it is right here in the camera raw tab. And if we click on this and we go to decode quality, you'll see this says use project settings. And where those project settings are, if you need to change those, if you're working in future with different clips, you can do that here in the project settings under color management. And you can set this to, you know, if you need to work with ACES or Rec 2020 or sRGB, whatever it may be, you can change it there. But for now, because we're using the Blackmagic RAW and we know what we're going to do here, I'm going to go to decode using project and then go down to clip. And this will give us all the information that was used in the camera when shot at that moment in time. The white balance settings and even the LUT that I was using to preview, or Tim was using to preview this footage, is applied here. And if I click off this, then it'll kind of take that LUT off, because we do not want to color grade on top of the LUT. I mean, of course we can, you know, if you like the LUT but it's just not punchy enough, then you can kind of punch it up. But me personally, I like to just get rid of the LUT that I was previewing or using to preview the clip with and just start from scratch. And then another thing you can do is use the color temp and tint to change the white balance. And to me, I have not seen a difference in whether you use the camera raw white balance tools or whether you use the actual color wheels temp and tint. The one difference is that I have seen that kind of irks me is if I change this here, it doesn't do this on a node. It just does it in the camera raw section. So let me go ahead and reset this. And so that's one reason I kind of like to white balance with a node, because that way if I want to go back and deactivate that node and just get a really quick way to kind of turn that on and off, I can do that there. And quality wise, like I said, I have not seen a difference. So I'm going to go ahead and, with our first node, I'm going to white balance, and first I will name this to just WB for white balance and come over here to the color wheels. So I'm just going to go down to the temp here and move this a little warmer, just slightly, not too much. And I think that's fine. And then I'll move forward. And from here, I'm going to label this contrast, because on this node, we're just going to make this pop a little bit more. And I'm going to do this with the curves. And I'm going to make a point here towards the top of the curves, and a point here towards the bottom around where these shadows are that we can see here in the histogram. And I will bring these down and then bring this last point at the very bottom down to kind of stretch out these shadows, because I want to be able to see these mountains here. For instance, if I were to, let's say I hit Alt S and make a new node in between these two, and then I deactivate this contrast node we just made, and if I just bump the contrast, if I just said, hey, let's just bump the contrast here, one thing we're going to notice is this mountain here and the details in the mountain really become kind of hazy due to where the luminance spectrum is at the moment. So one way I do like to use the curves is to contrast, because it just gives you that extra bit of control. And you can see there's a pretty big difference there. And once again, if I just, let's say, bring this back and then deactivate this and activate this, whoops, activate this one, you'll see a pretty big difference in the kind of contrast we're getting here. A lot of muddiness here in the sand and the mountain, and then here in the contrast node that we already made, we still have a lot of that information, but we're still getting that punch. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this one, and then we will just stick with this contrast node here. And maybe I'll pull this up a tad, not too much. Like I said, this was the morning, so I don't want to make it look like it was the middle of the day, like this in particular. I kind of just want to bring it up a little bit. Plus, later on, I do want to bring more highs out. But for now, I want to kind of keep it close to where it was, but just make it pop a little bit more. And then I'll bring these shadows down a little bit in the curves. And make sure that we're not coming below the 0. We're just about there. And that looks all right to me. And then from here, we can hit Alt S to make a new node. And I'm going to bump the saturation up a little bit. Not too much, because as we add more contrast throughout this tutorial, we will add more saturation. That's just kind of how contrast works. The more contrast, the more saturation. So I don't want to bring this up too much. I just want to make it pop a little bit more. at about 60 looks good to me. It almost looks overboard to me, but right at about 60, let's go to 60.80, that looks fine. And I'll relabel this to saturation, and we will get started on our power windows. And we'll do this with parallel nodes. And parallel nodes work in unison. If I hit Alt-P, Alt-P, just to make a few parallel nodes, in case you don't understand how parallel nodes work, it's pretty simple. You see how from the saturation node, it's pretty much giving me a copy of the image from this. So whatever this image is right here, it's copying this to this node, then it'll copy it to this node and copy it to this node, which gives us a fresh kind of, it gives us a fresh start with each of these nodes. So anything I do to this node is not happening in this node. Therefore, if I were to bring the saturation up to, let's say, 60 in this top node, and then in this bottom node, I bring it down to 40, we're essentially right back where we started. If I hit Control D, you see no difference there because these nodes work in unison together, so they'll cancel each other out. And this is one reason that I love to do my relighting and power windows in the parallel nodes, because they don't really, they work with each other in a very smooth way, and it just makes it really easy. And if I, make a node and then I make another serial node, then I'm kind of risking losing information from the node before, to whereas this one kind of gives me a clean slate in each node that I want to affect. That way I can go through the different sections of the image and know that I'm not going to be losing any information. So in this first one, what we're going to do is bring out these little tiny clouds here. There's these tiny clouds in the sky that can barely be seen. And there's a really easy way that we can bring that out. You guys have probably seen me do this in other videos. But if I hit the highlight button and I go to the qualifier and just raise the lows up, 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 up into about right where we're getting the highlights of the clouds, because I don't want to get the blue around the clouds. I just want to get really the clouds themselves, which is kind of tough to get because they can barely be seen. And then I'm going to hit the L for softening, the L soft. I'm going to kind of move that up just to get a little soft in there. And then I'll hit the blur or the denoise. I'll move the denoise up just a tad and the blur up just a tad. And the denoise. So the denoise and the blur are up to 2.0. And then one thing I'm seeing is that we're getting the ocean here. And then we're getting this little pole here from the fisherman's pole and a few other elements there on the ground. I don't need those, so I'm going to go over to the power windows, and this is where we'll make our first power window. I'll hit the circular power window and stretch this out and just move it to where these clouds are. And that way we are just getting the clouds that are in the scene. There's no other clouds in the sky that we need to worry about. Boom. So right there, looks pretty good. And from there, we can go back in to the curves and really make some adjustments to how these clouds look. Hit off the highlight button. And from here, actually, instead of the curves, I'm going to actually go to the primaries bars. And I'm going to move up the gain. Nice and easy. And now those clouds are popping out. And then I'll go to the gamma, which is the midtones. I'll move these up just a little bit. But I kind of like this nice little soft fall off that's happening. So if I go too high, then it all becomes kind of a white blob. I like that variance in shade from just the softness of the edges of the clouds, and then it's really kind of in the middle where they get really hot. I like that. So I'm going to go ahead and leave that at about 1.13. I think that's a pretty good place. Maybe even 1.10 is good enough. And if I deactivate this node, oh, that's awesome. You can already see that we just brought out a lot of depth there with such a simple thing. And then with this next parallel node here, I'm going to go into the power windows and we're going to make a custom power window. And we are going to mask out just the sand and the water. So I'm going to try to come down here and let me just start, let's say here, and start going through at the bottom of this mountain here. And if I hold and click, it'll give me some bars, and I can really kind of vary how this line moves. And as I've said in other videos, the power windows can be a headache at first. Just at first. Masking can be quite a headache at first. But over time, you get so fast at it that it becomes, I mean, it becomes something that you couldn't imagine your life without. And I remember when I first started with power windows and masking, it was like, oh, I hate masking. This is so, takes me forever. It's so detailed. But now it doesn't even seem that detailed. It just seems like something that needs to be done. And I usually get it done pretty quick. And if I hit this highlight button, you can see that we've got things masked out pretty well. And if I go to the soften here, it'll soften that edge for me, giving us a much more natural look. And then with this inside, this will move that softness into the inside, which will kind of help separate this from those mountains in the back, because I want to make sure I'm not getting the mountains and that we get a nice, realistic, kind of unnoticeable mask. It's very important when you're making masks is that they're really not noticeable. One thing that I've said about color grading before is that if you do it right, then no one will ever know that you did it. And it's kind of disheartening, but it's part of the fun. Is, you know, you show people stuff and they're like, oh, that's awesome. And they're like, your camera looks great. And you're like, dude, it's my camera plus 30 minutes of color grading. How about you relax? But anyway, moving on. So from here, I'm going to go to the curves, and we can make some points on the screen. If your qualifier is selected, if it's not, you can come over here, bottom left, go to the qualifier, and anything you click here will make a point in the luminance spectrum of the curves. So let's go to something really bright here, like the water. We can go to a highlight here, click that, and then we can come to something really dark over here, maybe this right here, and that's almost too dark. Let me Control Z and get that out of there. And I'll make a point, let's go right here. Yeah, there we go. And then I'll make a point right here. This is a good like mid-tone in between this really hot and this really kind of dark over here. And then now we can really bring this out. If I just pull this down, this last dot towards the bottom, not the last, second to last technically, if I just pull this down, you can see that we're already really doing great things for like this fisherman here. If I deactivate this node, we've already kind of drastically changed the image, which I love. That's the fun thing about color grading. It's just the little things you do that really go a long way. And from here, let's move these highlights up a little bit. I really like the amount of detail that's in the water here. And as you can see, the more I move this up, the more it all kind of becomes white and we kind of start losing detail. And I don't want to do that. So, you know, let's kind of go overboard real fast. Let's go really hot and then start bringing it down to a place where we feel like, yeah, about right there. About right there, I feel like I'm still seeing like the little ripples in the water and those little fine details that kind of keep that 6K footage looking very 6K. And then from here, with this middle dot, we can shift this slightly to our liking. You know what? This is kind of where the fisherman is. Kind of right here in this spectrum and over here. So, it's kind of affecting the water too. So let's go ahead and actually bring this down to give us a little more detail. And then we can make a dot in between these two right here and then bump that up to kind of get the highlights in the water popping a little more. Yeah, that already looks really good. And already we've really done magic to this image. And then let's go to the next node. Next parallel node, and then we'll go back to the power windows and make a custom power window. And I want to separate this mountain here, just this mountain here. So I'm going to zoom in with my mouse wheel, and then I'll click in on the mouse wheel and move around, and we can start masking out this mountain, which may seem daunting again, but you need the practice. If you're slow at masking, then do it more, because you want to get to the point where masking is just, it just feels natural. Because honestly, think about it. If there's something that could super enhance your image, but you don't want to do it because you're not that great at it. But if you got great at it, it would make it easy, then just do it more. Because then it becomes more fun than a hassle. And when you look back at your image, you're so glad that you took those extra steps. So I'm just slowly going through here and making dots. Some I'll just dot in, but then some of them I'll hold and kind of make them more curves. And like I said, the more you do it, the more you can kind of feel out how which ones just need to be a dot, and how long you need to hold this out, and how little you need to hold it out. It's really all experience. Color grading is a lot of experience. Nobody's just super dope right off the bat. I mean, people can be good and talented right off the bat, but trust me, the more experience you have, the better you get. Even if you're super sick at first, you're only going to get sicker with practice. And there we go. If I hit this highlight button, we can see this looks pretty good. It's not perfect, but it is pretty good. I'll move this down a little bit, and then let me go here to kind of see that, and we'll move this one in, and we'll move this one in, and let's see, we'll move this one in also, and that looks good enough. Yeah, that looks good enough, because what we can do is go to the soften. We'll pull this up a little bit, and then we'll come down to the inside and we'll soften it towards the inside. And you can see exactly what that's doing while the mask is selected. It's moving that softness towards the inside, giving us a nice smooth roll off. That way, yeah, now we're looking pretty good. And I can even move the size down a little bit. And if I come back in here and clean this up. I'm trying not to be too much of a perfectionist right now because this is just a tutorial, but at the same time, the more perfect you get it, the better the final image is. And that's all what we're kind of going for, is that drastic end result. So now that we've made our mask, I'm going to come over here to the curves, and I'm going to make a dot in the highlights of this mountain, in the curves, and then I'll make one just in the shadows down here. And again, we can just move this last dot down. I'm going to move it kind of further down in the spectrum because I don't want to lose information. If I move it down up here, then we might lose a little bit of detail, which might be the style you're going for, but personally, I'm going to move it a little further down, about there. And then I'm going to make a dot towards the top just to not affect anything that's higher than this. And then I'll move this up a little bit. Yeah, that's nice. And then one thing I'm noticing is that in the shadows, I mean, obviously in a sunset or in a sunrise, you know, where the sun's peeking over, you're going to see this kind of warmth. But in the shadows, you're going to see kind of a cooler, more bluish tone. And when we raise these shadows of the cool tones, we're even going to see a little bit more blue. And that's what I'm seeing here. When I deactivate this node, it's kind of going from like a warm tone, a warm greenish warm tone, to kind of a bluish tone down here. It's revealing that this is rocks, which you couldn't really see before. It kind of all looked like a grassy, like hill mountain. But now with the extra detail, we're kind of able to see that these are like rocks towards the bottom, and then it goes into foliage towards the top of this mountain. But I don't really like this blue tone that we're getting here. And we can affect this by going right into the log wheels, and then in the shadows of this image, we can move this towards the warm side just a little bit, and then come down here to the low range and high range of the log wheels and move that low range down. And I think that's looking pretty stinking good. Yeah, I think that looks pretty solid, if you ask me. So, moving on, what do we do? Hit Alt-P for another parallel node. And then in this node in particular, we're going to come over here to this mountain to the left. And I'm going to go to the power windows again. I'm going to make a custom power window as we've been doing. And I'm going to start right here at the side of this bridge. Make a dot here at the bottom. I'm going to make a dot right here where the bridge meets the mountain, because I do not want to get the bridge really in particularly. And then start making our power window along this mountain. And you know what? One thing we could do to make this a little easier is I could select this, and then let's say I make a dot at the bottom and then a dot here, and then I come all the way up here. Seems crazy, I know, but trust me. I'll make a dot over here, and then I'll just try to walk alongside this bottom where the coastline is. I was going to say shoreline, but I don't know if that's even a thing. I'm just making up words here. So let me smoothly kind of go through this. Kind of bend that out a little bit just for natural sake. Straighten this out to walk alongside that bridge. And then what we can do is, I'm going to move this over a little bit. This is color grading. It's just a big inching and inching, and then you inch this and you inch this, and voila. So right now, if I hit the highlight button, we can see that we have this mountain, but we also have a little bit of the sky. What we can do is go to the qualifier, and we can pull down these highs in the luminance spectrum to get rid of the sky. And this will kind of help us out. It'll save us a lot of time and even give us a more clean, or a cleaner, not more clean, that's not a phrase, a cleaner mask along the top. And all we have to do is soften the high soft here at the top of this, and then pull this down a little bit. And this wouldn't work in every situation, but in this situation it works quite well. So with that selected, we can go back to our power window, and then we can soften that up a bit. Maybe just a 0.16, maybe 0.22, and then maybe pull this inside a little bit. And we should have a pretty solid mask. And if I hit off the highlight button, and then we come in here and we make some, actually this time I am just going to use the contrast control. It's going to make things easy and just bump this contrast up. Right here at the bottom left, I'm just bumping the contrast, bumping the contrast, bumping the contrast. And that looks pretty solid. I'm actually going to add more contrast after all of these power windows. So I'm trying to keep that in mind as I go through this, because I don't want to add too much contrast like this, and then in the end add more contrast to the whole thing, and then something looks funny. You guys get where I'm going with this. So, and also if I bump too much contrast here, it just starts to look unnatural with the sky. You start to realize where that fall off is from our qualifier. I don't want that to happen either, which is another reason why I'll add more contrast to the entire thing in the end. But let me just move this up to 1.450. It's definitely helping. It would be a little bit more faded because it's in the distance, so I don't want to lose that either. And then once again, we'll hit Alt-P to make another parallel node. And this time we're going to select the bridge and then these mountains back here. How are we going to do that? Very similarly to the way that we masked the last one. I'm going to go to a custom power window, and then kind of go through this, the edge of this mountain here, slowly going through and selecting, and then we'll go through. And before, when I got the sand and the water, I did not get these rocks, and so I'm going to go ahead and get these rocks right now so we can make those pop too. And then I'm going to try to ride this line that we used before, and then I'm going to come up here to the sky and just get this whole bridge just like that, and then boom. If I hit the highlight button, we should have a pretty good power window here, and we can actually move this softness to the inside a little bit to help that out, and then soften this whole thing. And then again, we can clean this up just like this, and even soften this. We can just soften this section, which will really help a lot with getting rid of the mountain. And maybe move this out a little more. A little more. That could do the job for us. Let me get this out a little more. Now, of course, you could take more time and just get a really good power window, but obviously because it's a tutorial, I'm trying to go somewhat quickly so I don't lose you all's attention span. And so let me clean these up a little more. You know, it's tough. A true creative is a true perfectionist, I'll tell you that. And then we can hit off the highlight button. And from here, we can make some dots in the curves. Because if I simply go to the contrast, that's just not going to work. And another thing we need to do, I almost forgot, is go to the qualifier and get the sky out of there. So if I go to the qualifier and to the luminance and bring these highs down until the sky is gone about, let's say, there. And it's also getting some of the bridge here, but that's okay. I don't want to affect that part of the bridge because it's already as high as it needs to be in the luminance spectrum for now. So I can go ahead and get rid of that too. And then I will soften that high spectrum of the luminance a little bit with that H soft. And then I'll denoise a little bit and blur a little just to give us a little cleaner of a qualification. And then from here, I'll go back to the curves and we can select a shadow, let's say this shadow right here, and a high point, let's say right here. And from here, we're looking pretty good. And I might make my own point down here in the curves and bring this down a little bit. You see what that's doing there? It's giving us a little more depth in the bridge here. See that? Really, really slick. I like that. And then we can kind of bring down this soft, this shadowy spectrum right here. It's kind of this middle point that we made. And then maybe this low point, bring this down a little more. We don't want to go too crazy, but I do want to make it pop. Y'all know how I like to do. Y'all know how I like to do. Let's bring this down a little bit. Maybe this too. Yes. And then we'll make a point here towards the highlights that we can see in the histogram. And we can bump this up a little bit. That's not bad. But I do not like this section here. It's kind of running into our other, or it's kind of running off of our other power window. So if we move that back a little bit, we might be able to save ourselves. But also, because we can see this clear fall off here, one thing we can do is come back to that mountain, which would have been the node above that, and then pull the contrast back a little bit. That way, boom, now the line's gone. Now we can't really see where one power window starts and the other one begins. So if I deactivate that bridge node, just the bridge node, boom, now that looks freaking sick. Are you kidding me? And if I go through all of these and just deactivate, it's like a whole different image. It's like a whole entire different image. But we can do something else. We can, and so we shall. I'm going to move these up, and of course I'm going to hit Alt-P to make one more. Whoops. Click on the saturation node, Alt-P. No, that's not exactly what I want to do. Alt-P, and from here, I kind of, you can kind of see that it goes from blue into this sunrise warmth here, and then back to blue here in the water. And what I want to do is make that sunrise warmth pop out a little bit more. So what we can do is make ourselves another power window. You guessed it. And I'm just going to make a circular power window. Hopefully this will work. I'm not going to promise anything, but I am feeling pretty good about it. And I'll move this to about here. Stretch this out to get that whole bridge. And I'm going to soften this some more, just in case. Maybe I'll stretch this out a tad more. And then I'm going to come to the qualifier, hit the highlight button so we can see what we're qualifying. And I'm going to raise the lows of the luminance to get all the shadows out. And even the midtones, I'm going to get the majority of this stuff out. I really just want to get kind of the high highlights. And that looks good to me. Then I can soften that section and maybe denoise a little bit. Maybe the blur radius a tad. And maybe even soften this and bring this in a little more. A little more. A little more. Move the size down. And a little more. And then from here in the log wheels, in the highlights, we can move this towards the orange. Kind of the reddish orange to give us a little bit more of a punch there. Just to give it a little bit more like unrealistic but realistic sunrise, if you know what I mean. And then if I go to this node and I hit Control D to deactivate, you see that? Just that little thing. It's just a little thing, but that's the colorist's job, is to do those little things that make an image seem just that much more perfect. Like you captured it at just that right perfect time when the sun was coming through the mountains and kind of cascading over the bridge. And we can bring this down a little bit in the midtones. The midtones don't need to go that hard. And then Control D. And that looks nice. It doesn't look, it's not really that noticeable. I think, you know, when you deactivate it and activate it, it might look like it was added, of course, but it's the kind of thing that once somebody saw it for the first time, they would never imagine. And let's try to make this power window a little bigger to give us a little more of that orange tone over the horizon. Yes, I like that. Now, deactivate, activate. Now it really looks like a blue cascading down into this little orange. We can go a little further down the size. We don't have to go that far into the sky. But, you know, you can do whatever you want. It's really up to you and kind of your creative intuition, if you will. And so from here, I'm going to hit Alt-S to make a serial node. And we are pretty much done with the relighting. And if we deactivate all of this relighting here, wow. Are you kidding me? Let's play it back. That looks good. I gotta say, that looks good. I'm not mad at this image. I'm really not mad at this image. One thing I would like to do is finally bump up the contrast one last time in this last node to really make it pop. And here's where you can make it pop as much as you want, and we still have like that detail of the rocks and the water hitting the rocks and this mountain back here and the bridge just popping like crazy. My family lives in San Francisco, so I've got a lot of fond memories of this bridge, and it's just a pleasure to make it look this good. If I just collect all these last nodes past the parallel tree, come on, people. Come on, people. That looks nice. Now, another way you could add contrast. Now, let me just show you one more way. Is by making some points in the curves. You see we got the highlights up here. Boom. The midtones around here of the image. Boom. And the shadows down here. This might give us a little more control. And this way, if we wanted to add a little film fade, we could pull this up. At the very bottom, we could pull this up. And then maybe even make a new dot here. Pull this down, which gives us a little more detail even, but we don't want to overdo it because it can get crazy real fast. Yeah, about like right there. Oh, Oh, that's so smooth. I don't want to lose that mountain though. And then bring these down a little bit. And we can really bump those highs. That's another way to add that contrast if you want to get more control. And I think this gave us a much more film-esque look with that little film fade. And it kind of takes your eyes off of the sand. Because before, the sand, it was so detailed all the way up to the very, to the closest part of the image to us. But with that selected, it kind of fades this out and makes you focus on the fisherman and the bridge. Now our full focus is on the fisherman and the bridge. And I am into this shot right now. Way to go, Tim, for getting this shot. Once again, guys, whatever kind of shots you all want to see, let me know. I'm working on a collection of stock footage. So whether it be landscape stuff, fashion stuff, whatever it is, let me know, and I'll try to bring it to you guys in this series. And I hope you guys learned something. If you did learn something, definitely click that like button. And if you didn't learn something, click the like button anyway. It really helped me out. And if you have any comments, questions, or concerns, definitely leave them in the comment section down below. You know I always try to reply. And of course, if you're not subscribed to the channel, please do. I always make color grading tutorials, fusion tutorials. It's a new year and we're getting into new things and it's about to get wild. As you can see, I'm uploading free raw footage, 6K for you guys to download. So definitely make sure to subscribe. And as always, I'm Marcel, and this has been The Modern Filmmaker. And I'll see y'all next time. Peace!